The GameCube has a handle. I barely used it, but I did spend hours playing Donkey Kong by hitting a pair of plastic bongos. Once you get to that part of the GameCube, the handle starts to seem pretty reasonable. Nintendo began with a purple cube, gave it tiny discs and a controller with one enormous green button, and then kept finding new things to plug into it. There was a wireless controller with a receiver sticking out the front, a cable that turned a Game Boy Advance into a second screen, a keyboard controller wide enough to take up 2 ports, a microphone, a Game Boy that attached underneath the console, and then the bongos. The GameCube looked different before you turned it on. Over time, the ways of playing it got even stranger. Put a GameCube beside the other major consoles from that generation, and it looks like it missed a meeting. The PlayStation 2 is a black rectangle. The original Xbox is a large black box with a green circle in the middle, but it still looks like electronics. Then there is the GameCube. Mine was purple. Nintendo called it indigo, but we all know it was purple. The power button, reset button, and disc lid were all on the top. 4 controller ports faced straight into the room. The handle stuck out behind it. My parents gave me the GameCube after it belonged to my older brother, and I had it in my own room with a CRT. The television was already the biggest thing in my room. The GameCube only had to find a spot nearby. That was easy. It could sit on a shelf, on the floor, or beside the television. I could sit on the floor, reach the controller, and swap games without dragging the console out from under anything. From above, it looked like a very simple machine. Open the lid, put in a game, close it. Turn it over, and there were plastic covers hiding expansion ports underneath. A lot of the console's strangest ideas started there. The first surprise was already under the lid. GameCube discs are about 8 centimeters across. A standard DVD is 12. Put them beside each other, and the GameCube discs looked like someone washed a normal game disc on the wrong setting. I loved them. The case and instruction booklet were normal sized. Then you opened the case and found this little disc clipped into the middle. A PlayStation 2 game could look like a movie DVD. An Xbox game looked like a regular disc. A GameCube disc could only be a GameCube disc. The format held about 1.5 gigabytes, so it gave developers less room on the disc than the full-size DVD formats used by the other consoles. The regular GameCube also did not play DVD movies. That was a real difference at the time. The PlayStation 2 could be the game system and the DVD player in the same room. The GameCube was there to play GameCube games, except there was another version. In Japan, Panasonic released the Q. It was an officially licensed GameCube-compatible machine with an actual DVD player built into it. The Q looks like a GameCube trying very hard to look expensive. It has a silver body, a mirrored front, a display, glowing controller ports, and a front-loading disc tray. It even came with a remote. It could play the same GameCube games, but it looked like a piece of home theater equipment. The version that played DVDs was silver, shiny, and looked comfortable beside a stereo receiver. The version Nintendo mainly sold was purple, top-loading, and used tiny discs. Then you get to the controller. It looks strange in a picture. The left stick sits above a tiny D-pad. The right side has one huge green A button, and a smaller red button and 2 gray buttons wrapped around them, and a yellow C stick below. The Z button is tucked above the right trigger like it arrived late. Then you hold it. The A button makes immediate sense. It is where your thumb wants to sit, so Nintendo made it enormous. The other buttons are arranged by where your thumb moves from A. Nintendo did not treat every input as equally important. That large A button and the yellow stick are the 2 parts that I picture first. The C stick was technically the second analog stick, but it did not feel like the matching right stick on a modern controller. It felt like the Nintendo 64 C buttons had been pushed together into one little nub. The shoulder triggers worked differently too. You could press them part way and then keep going until they clicked at the bottom. Super Mario Sunshine used both stages of the R trigger. Press it lightly and Mario sprayed water while he ran. Press it all the way down and he stopped to aim. That is a control idea you can feel without opening a settings menu. Super Smash Bros. Melee became even more attached to this controller. Dash dancing is a good example. You can flick the stick back and forth during the opening part of a dash, reversing direction before the character settles into a run. It looks like a character rapidly changing its mind, but in competitive play, it's a very basic movement pattern. The shape around that stick, the short flick, the C stick, the trigger clicks, all of it became part of how people learned Melee. Smash players never left that controller behind. Nintendo brought GameCube controller support back for Smash on the Wii U, and again on the Switch. Competitive Melee still revolves around that wired GameCube controller more than 2 decades later. And if I'm playing a GameCube game now, that is the only controller I want to use. It is not perfect, the D-pad is tiny, the Z button is awkward, the C stick is less useful in games that want a full second analog stick. A face button layout built around the main actions gets less convincing when a game expects 4 equal buttons, but the games that fit it really fit it. Nintendo even made a wireless version without throwing the design away. The WaveBird has the same classic layout with a battery compartment underneath it, and a small receiver that plugs into the console. This was not a controller you paired through a menu. The controller and receiver each had a dial numbered 1 through 16. Set them to the same number and turn the controller on. 2 AA batteries could last up to 100 hours, and Nintendo recommended using it within 20 feet. The trade-off was no rumble. But for a console that had 4 corded controllers across the room, the WaveBird was a big deal. It let one person sit wherever they wanted without changing what a GameCube felt like. The controller also changed what happened before a game even loaded. The normal GameCube startup is already one of the best console sounds ever made. A little cube rolls around the screen, drops into the logo, and then lands on the final note. But if you hold Z on the first controller while the system turns on, the sound changes into a squeaky version. There's another version that asks for a lot more cooperation. Plug in 4 controllers and hold Z on all 4 of them during the startup. You either need 4 people or 1 person with a plan and too many hands. One of the best things about this is back in the day, someone had to show you this. And then the next time you showed your friends it when they came over. And that was all before a game even loaded. Once it did, Nintendo's own games were just as playful. That started on launch day in North America with Luigi's Mansion. Nintendo introduced its new console with Mario's nervous brother walking through a haunted house with a vacuum cleaner. Luigi shakes when he enters a room, he hums along with the music when he's trying to act brave. The ghosts stretch and bounce around while he gets pulled across the floor behind them. It also showed off the hardware. Luigi's flashlight changed the lighting as he moved. Ghosts were transparent, mirrors reflect the room behind him. Nintendo could have opened with a safe Mario game. Instead, the launch showcased was a scared plumber cleaning ghosts out of a mansion. 15 days later, Pikmin came out in North America. Now you were Olimar, a tiny astronaut standing in somebody's garden, throwing plant creatures at a broken spaceship while the day slowly ran out. The scale makes ordinary objects look huge. A cardboard box becomes a wall, a bottle cap looks valuable, a beetle can ruin the afternoon. The game could put more than 100 Pikmin sprouts on screen at once. That gave you a very impressive number of tiny lives to manage. In its first month, the GameCube already had a haunted vacuum game and a brand new strategy game about tiny plant creatures. When Mario got his own GameCube game, Nintendo sent him to a tropical resort, blamed him for a sludge problem, and trapped a talking water pump to his back. Sunshine has plenty of rough edges, but it commits to its setting. Water sprays across the ground, goop covers entire areas, Mario slides through it, cleans it, and gets yelled at by vacationers. Then Wind Waker arrived as a bright cartoon after a lot of people had expected a darker, more realistic Zelda. My first strong GameCube memory is watching my older brother play it before the console was passed down to me. I had to stay quiet because if I talked too much, I got kicked out. He sailed across the Great Sea. I watched as long as I did not provide constant updates. I was not thinking about the reaction of the art styles. Link's face moved when something happened. The ocean went on forever, and I wanted to know where the boat was going. Later, the console became mine, and I got to play Wind Waker myself. Even near the end of the GameCube's life, Nintendo was still publishing games this odd. Chibi-Robo came out in North America in 2006. You played a tiny robot in a family home. You scrub stains, pick up trash, help toys that come alive, and earn happy points by trying to make the family happier. Your battery drains as you move, so Chibi-Robo carries his own power cord behind him and plugs himself into the wall outlets. The game looks cute, then starts dealing with an unemployed dad, stressed parents, a daughter who only speaks like a frog, and all the small problems inside the house. The physical GameCube copy also became expensive. As I'm writing this, a complete North America copy is probably around 200 bucks. Nintendo added Chibi-Robo to the Switch 2 GameCube library in 2025, so at least playing it no longer requires buying that original disc. None of those games look much like each other. Each one starts with a strange idea and commits to it. Luigi gets the vacuum, Olimar gets 100 plant creatures, Mario gets the water pump, Link gets the cartoon ocean, Chibi-Robo gets an extension cord. Those ideas felt at home coming out of that purple cube. And some games wanted the hardware around the cube to change too. The 4 ports on the front did not have to hold 4 normal controllers. Nintendo sold a cable that connected a Game Boy Advance to one of them. Depending on the game, the handheld could exchange data, become an input device, or act as another screen. The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures built an entire multiplayer Zelda around that connection. Up to 4 links could run around together on the television. When one player entered a house or cave, that person's link moved onto the screen of their Game Boy Advance. The other players could keep moving on the television while you look down at your own little part of Hyrule. It is a great multiplayer idea. The setup is a lot. Every player needs a Game Boy Advance and a GameCube GBA cable. The cable does not power the handheld either, so everybody also needs charged batteries. 4-player Zelda meant 1 GameCube, 1 television, 4 handhelds, 4 cables, and a group of friends who somehow owned the correct combination of everything. That is much less convenient than plugging in 4 controllers, but it gave each player private information without taking everyone off the shared screen. One person could disappear into a cave while the rest kept going, or find something without immediately showing the whole room. Nintendo kept chasing that shared screen and private screen idea. The Wii U eventually built a screen into its own controller. On the GameCube, you supplied the screen yourself. The Game Boy Player took the same connection between the 2 systems and flipped it around. Instead of using the handheld to change a GameCube game, you attached a piece of hardware underneath the GameCube and played the Game Boy games through the television. The player connected to the high-speed port on the bottom. You put a Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Advance cartridge into the front, then loaded a separate startup disc in the GameCube. It turned that little cube into a very wide Game Boy. I actually eventually got one, and I remember playing Pokemon Fire Red and Emerald on the big screen. Those were games I knew as handheld games. Then the same cartridges were running through my purple GameCube and onto the CRT in my room. I could use the GameCube controllers, save to the cartridge, turn the system off, pull the game out, and keep playing it on a Game Boy Advance. Of all the GameCube's add-ons, this one feels the least like a novelty to me. It gave the console another library. I could play handheld Pokemon on the same CRT as Sunshine and Wind Waker. The other doors underneath the GameCube led somewhere much less developed. Nintendo made 2 network adapters for the console. One was a modem for dial-up, and the other was a broadband adapter with an Ethernet port. Both snapped into the serial port 1 underneath the system. The GameCube could go online, it just didn't happen very often. Only 8 released games used either adapter at all. That number includes local network games, and a Japanese baseball game that used it to download data. Only a handful actually offered play over the internet. The dial-up manual warned that call waiting could interrupt gameplay if somebody phoned the house. That is an incredible problem to put in a console manual now. Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2 was the first online GameCube game. It was an action RPG from Sega, where you created a character, entered online lobbies, joined teams of up to 4, and went out to fight and collect gear. It had balloon chat, symbols, preset phrases that could translate between languages, and an on-screen keyboard. Or you could import one of the strangest controllers made for the system. The company ASCII released a GameCube keyboard controller in Japan. It looks like someone cut a normal GameCube controller in half, moved the grips apart, and then installed a computer keyboard right in between. It has regular controller inputs on both ends. The keyboard includes Latin letters and Japanese hiragana. 2 cables come out of it because the controller and keyboard each use their own port. It has no rumble, which was probably wise if you're trying to type on it. A contemporary review liked the idea and hated how cramped the keys were. When Phantasy Star Online launched in North America, the only hardware option was importing this controller from Japan. I never played this game, but as someone who put a lot of time into RuneScape and World of Warcraft, this version of the GameCube has always interested me. Phantasy Star Online is not the same type of game as World of Warcraft. What grabs me is the setup. You lift a cover from the bottom of the console, Install a network adapter and connect an Ethernet cable or phone line. Then you plug in a controller wide enough to include a keyboard and meet other players through the purple cube. I can look at that setup and imagine Nintendo pushing much further into online games. It just never happened on the GameCube. Instead, 3 of the console's online releases were Phantasy Star games. A few others were local networks, and the experiment mostly stopped there. Nintendo was much more committed to experiments that happened in the same room. The DK Bongos originally came with Donkey Konga. That game is a rhythm game. Notes move across the screen and tell you to hit the left drum, the right drum both at once, or clap. The controller has 2 plastic drum heads, a start button, and a sound sensor in the middle that listens for the clap. Then Nintendo used it for a platformer. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is not a rhythm game. You do not play with a song. You control Donkey Kong by hitting furniture. Tap the right drum and he moves right, tap the left and he moves left. Alternate faster and he runs. Hit both at once and he jumps. Clapping sends out a shockwave. DK can grab bananas, stun enemies, or interact with something nearby. The first few minutes feel like your hands have been assigned the wrong job. Then it clicks. Running has a rhythm because your hands alternate. Jumping feels bigger because both hands come down together. A clap breaks the pattern and sends out the shockwave. I played a ton of Jungle Bee, and I love those bongos. They made the platformer physical. I was not holding a stick slightly to the right, I was hitting the right side over and over to make Donkey Kong sprint. The game gets more complicated than its 4 basic inputs suggest. It wants you to chain actions together, bounce off an enemy, grab a vine, collect bananas, hit a flower, keep moving, and try not to touch the ground until you can cash the whole sequence in. The longer the combo lasts, the more bananas you earn. So there's a simple way to finish a level, and a much louder way to play it well. The boss fights use the controller differently again. When Donkey Kong fights another ape, the left and right drums become the punches, clap to dodge, and alternate hits as fast as you can when there's an opening. It's one of the few games where getting better can be heard from another room. Jungle Beat was also the first project from Nintendo's new Tokyo development team. Yoshiaki Koizumi had spent years working on character movement and cameras. He said he kept hearing that controlling characters and cameras in modern games was difficult, and he wanted this project to be simple enough for anyone to understand. The team was shown a sample set of bongos. Once they decided to build an action game around them, they could not treat the drums like a normal controller. They had to come up with a broader actions that made sense when the player only had left, right, both, and clap. At E3, the developers noticed that people playing it were smiling and helping each other figure it out. That team went on to make Super Mario Galaxy. Jungle Beat does not seem worried about what Donkey Kong platformer is supposed to look like. There's no reason the bongos should be a good controller for running, jumping, collecting bananas, riding animals, and punching another gorilla. They are though. The regular GameCube controller can technically play the game too. That is useful now if the bongos are missing. It is also missing the part I loved. With the bongos in front of you, the game takes over a small area of the room. You sit differently, your hands move differently, anybody nearby knows you're playing the game. The bongos are the accessory I actually spent hours using. Nintendo did not stop after one controller experiment. It kept asking whether a particular game would be better if the player had a different object in front of them. Sometimes that object was another screen. Sometimes it was a keyboard. For Donkey Kong, it was 2 plastic drums and a permission to make some noise. The bongos already had a sound sensor for clapping. Then, Nintendo sold a separate microphone. It plugs into a memory card slot, not a controller port. Mario Party 6 included it for voice command minigames. Hold the button, say a command, and hope the game heard the word you meant to say. Voice command Mario Party would have been enough. Then there was Odama. Odama is part pinball game and part military strategy game set on a battlefield in medieval Japan. You use giant flippers to knock a massive ball through buildings, enemy troops, and occasionally your own troops. At the same time, you speak into the microphone to order soldiers to charge, defend, change formation, or move towards a gate. The microphone came in the box. That game was released in 2006, near the end of the console's life. Nintendo was still willing to publish a military pinball game controlled partly by shouting at a plastic microphone plugged into the memory card slot at the end of its life. Wow. Other companies looked at the handle and tried to finish the portability idea. Inact made a 5.4-inch LCD screen that attached over the top of the console. It folded down over the lid, came in colors that matched the system, and left the buttons and disc compartment accessible. Then Inax sold a rechargeable battery meant to power the screen and GameCube together. The company claimed about an hour and a half of battery life. A review from that time got a little less than that. So yes, you could carry the GameCube somewhere, open the screen, and play without a television or wall outlet for a while. You needed the console, screen, battery, controller, and game. It was portable after enough plastic had been attached, but the handle finally had a complete job. Third-party companies also made the usual controllers, memory cards, arcade stick, dance pads, and carrying cases. And Capcom worked with Nubby Tech on a Resident Evil 4 controller shaped like a chainsaw. It had fake blood on the blade, a sound chip that made a chainsaw noise. It also came with a display stand for the time you were not trying to play Resident Evil with the chainsaw in your lap. By that point, a chainsaw controller barely stood out. All of this hardware grew around a console that never led its generation. The GameCube sold 21 million systems worldwide. That is a lot of consoles. It was also far behind the PlayStation 2, which Sony now reports sold more than 160 million copies. Oh my god. There are far more reasons for that gap than the color, handle, or disc format. The GameCube did lose the sales race. It also became one of the easiest consoles to recognize from a few pieces. A cube, 4 circles on the front, a handle behind it, purple if you're picturing mine. My memories are all over this thing. I first watched it from the side while my older brother played. Later it was in my room and the hardware around it kept changing depending on what I wanted to play. The same box sat there while the object in my hands kept changing. Nintendo kept finding reasons to put something else in your hands. I started thinking about this video because the handle was funny. After looking at what was made for the console, the handle barely makes the list. By the time Donkey Kong is being controlled with drums and Pokemon is running through hardware screwed underneath it, the handle is no longer the strangest part. It might be the most normal part of the whole thing. That's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. Let me know which GameCube game or accessory comes back first to you when you think about it. If you want to support the channel, you can like, subscribe, or check out the memberships. I appreciate all the support. Have a great one. And again, thank you so much for watching.